The nav computer pinged, signaling our arrival. "All right, grunts, touchdown in 5, growled Cathar, his 4 eyes scanning the readouts. "Planet designated Earth. The locals call it a death world. Hilarious, right?" Grack chortled, his mandibles clicking. "Death world? Look at it, all green and blue. The intel says the dominant species is soft, squishy, and calls themselves humans. This is going to be the easiest payday of the cycle." I had to agree. The planet looked almost laughably serene from orbit. Overrated for sure. The client wanted some biological samples and a few live specimens. Cakewalk. The moment the ramp lowered, the planet's true nature hit us like a plasma blast. The air wasn't just air. It was a thick, humid soup that clogged our filters. The gravity felt heavy. Unnaturally so. "Stay sharp," Cathar rumbled, his good humor already evaporating. We fanned out, our pulse rifles at the ready. The jungle was a nightmare of twisted, alien-looking flora. Grack brushed against a seemingly harmless vine, and a line of sizzling blisters instantly erupted on his forearm. He screamed, cursing the planet. "Toxic plants," I noted into my comms. "Just great." An hour into the patrol, a storm rolled in without warning. The sky turned a violent shade of purple-black, and rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, so heavy it felt like being pummeled. Lightning spider-webbed across the clouds, striking so close the ground shook. We took shelter under a massive rock overhang, the noise deafening. It was during a lull in the thunder that we heard it. A deep, guttural roar that vibrated through our bones. Out in the deluge, a creature the size of our dropship tore through the trees, its hide like armored plating, its teeth like daggers. It wasn't hunting us, thankfully. It was running from something. What could possibly make a beast like that run in fear? The storm passed as quickly as it came, leaving a trail of steam and destruction. We pressed on, our earlier arrogance replaced by a gnawing unease. That's when we started finding the signs. First, one of our scout drones, a top-of-the-line model, lay crumpled and torn apart. Not shot, not burned, ripped apart by sheer force. A little further on, we found footprints. Not from any creature we'd seen. They were bipedal, booted, human. But the stride was too long, the impressions too deep in the mud, suggesting immense weight and power. Cathar knelt, examining one of the prints. "Impossible," he muttered. "No soft-skinned primate could..." He trailed off, looking at the jungle around us. Then we found the nest. It belonged to those massive predators we saw earlier. And it was a slaughterhouse. Several of the giant beasts lay dead, their armored hides pierced and broken. But the wounds weren't from energy weapons, they were from sharpened sticks. Giant tree-trunk-sized spears had been driven through their chests, pinning them to the ground. This wasn't a hunt, it was an extermination. Cathar stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the carnage. A flicker of genuine fear crossed his face, the first I'd ever seen. "This isn't right," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of our suit systems. The intel was wrong, all of it. He dismissed it a moment later, shaking his head. "It's just a primitive species. Dumb luck. Keep moving." But I could tell he didn't believe it. None of us did. We were the intruders here. We were the ones being watched. The client said this was a simple snatch and grab on a backwater planet. They failed to mention that this wasn't just a death world. It was a human death world. And we had just become the prey. Start with a tense, low-key tone. The stench of ozone and scorched earth hung heavy in the air. Xylar, a veteran of 100 campaigns, adjusted the grip on his plasma rifle. His team, the best of the Kretak mercenaries, lay in wait. The intelligence was solid. A small, lightly armed human patrol was moving through this valley. Prey. Xylar smirked, the mandibles on his jaw clicking softly. They'd been told these humans were fragile, soft-skinned creatures. Easy credits. The bait was set, a downed supply drone, its beacon pulsing weakly. The trap was perfect. Movement. Figures emerged from the dense, alien foliage. 5 of them. They moved with a strange fluid grace, their heads swiveling, taking in everything. What struck Xylar as odd was their gear. It was scratched, dented, and caked in mud. But the humans themselves? Not a mark. They walked through the aftermath of a plasma bombardment as if it were a light spring rain. Xylar's confidence wavered for a microsecond. The intel said this area had been glassed. How were they so clean? The patrol's leader gestured, and the group fanned out, disappearing into the undergrowth with an unnerving silence. Xylar signaled his team. Engage. The first plasma bolt screamed from the ridge, a bolt of pure energy that should have turned its target to ash. It hit nothing but a tree, which exploded in a shower of splinters. Then chaos. It wasn't a battle. It was a hunt, and they were the prey. The humans didn't stand and fight. They used the terrain, the very rocks and trees, as weapons. A tripwire, almost invisible, sent a log swinging down, crushing one of Xylar's squadmates. A volley of high-velocity projectiles, tiny metal slivers, punched through the armor of another from an unseen position. They were solid slugs, primitive yet devastatingly effective. Panic began to ripple through the Kretok comms. "Where are they? I can't get a lock," one shouted. "They're everywhere," screamed another. The humans were phantoms, striking and melting away before a target could be acquired. A thick gray mist native to this world began to roll into the valley. Perfect cover, Xylar thought, a chance to regroup. He ordered his remaining soldiers to consolidate. That's when the real fear began. One of his riflemen, standing not 5 meters away, suddenly stiffened. A small, neat hole appeared in his helmet, and he dropped without a sound. No flash, no energy signature. Just silence. Then another soldier, then a third. One by one, his team was being picked off by an invisible executioner. The comms were a mess of terrified screams and static. Xylar desperately scanned the tree line, his advanced optics cutting through the fog. For a fleeting moment, he saw it. A human shape, draped in what looked like foliage, perched on a high branch. A long rifle was aimed directly at him. The figure was utterly still, a predator in its element. Before Xylar could even raise his weapon, the figure simply wasn't there anymore. It had vanished back into the mist, a ghost in the machine. Xylar was alone. The bait was still pulsing its beacon, a mocking invitation. He looked at the bodies of his elite team, taken down by a supposedly inferior species. These humans didn't fight with brute force. They fought with their minds, with the patience of a spider and the lethality of a viper. They weren't soldiers. They were wraiths. And in that moment, Xylar understood a chilling truth. They weren't on a planet of soft-skinned prey. They had stumbled into the hunting grounds of humanity. And the hunt had just begun. Sound of crackling fire and distant, unsettling chirps of alien fauna. "Zorlag, check your energy pack. Rylak, are you picking up anything on the scanners? Anything at all? No? Good. Let's take a breather here. The rest of you form a perimeter. Keep your blasters up and your senses sharp. Status report. Calyx? Gone. Vanished into the trees without a sound. Gorn? Found him. Or what was left of him. His armor was melted clean through, but there were no blaster marks. Just a primitive chemical compound smeared on a vine. Vex is not doing well. He's been staring at that spot where Calyx disappeared for the last cycle, just muttering. This is all wrong. We came here for a simple extraction. The target was a small colony of primitives. Uncontacted, they said. Minimal resistance, they promised. They didn't tell us we'd be fighting ghosts in a forest that wants us dead. These humans. They don't fight like anything I've ever encountered. We came in with overwhelming firepower, expecting to shock them into submission. But they just faded away. We've been on this rock for 3 cycles, and I've seen maybe 5 of them in total. A flicker of movement here, a shadow there. But their presence is everywhere. The ground itself is our enemy. Rylak almost lost a leg to a concealed pit filled with sharpened stakes. Think about that. No energy fields, no advanced alloys, just wood, sharpened wood. and it nearly crippled a fully armored mercenary. They're using the terrain against us, turning this whole cursed jungle into one giant weapon. They know every vine, every pit, every shadow. They herd us, funnel us into kill zones without firing a single shot. We're the ones with the advanced tracking systems, yet we're the ones being hunted, and the silence, that's the worst part. There are no battle cries, no shouted commands. We'll be marching, and suddenly one of us is just gone, snatched by a rope from a branch above. No sound, no struggle, just an empty space where a squad mate used to be. The efficiency is terrifying. It's like they communicate without speaking, moving as a single organism with a singular purpose to unmake us. Our comms are flooded with static, but theirs must be crystal clear. Or maybe they don't need them, maybe they just know. It feels like we're fighting a hive mind, a force of nature. We came here with blasters and bravado. They're fighting us with sticks, mud, and the fear they plant in our own minds. A sudden, sharp snap of a twig nearby, followed by a choked gasp and a thud. What was that? Rylak, report. Rylak, scan his position. No life signs? How? He was right there. We checked that area. We cleared it. He was standing on solid ground. Breathing becomes heavier, more panicked. See? See what I mean? It's not just traps we can see. It's something else. They're inside our heads. They know our procedures, our formations, they know how we think. Brute force is useless here. Our strength means nothing. This isn't a battle, it's a dismantling. We thought we were the predators, we were wrong. We're just prey that doesn't know it's already caught. We have to get off this planet. Now. This story shows just how resourceful humans can be, even against overwhelming odds. Start with a tense atmospheric tone. For cycles, the Cathar Legion had known only victory. We were the sharp edge of the Dominion, the glorious enforcers of its will, feared across 1,000 systems. We faced down armored behemoths on glacial worlds and psychic swarms in nebulae that sang with madness. Nothing could break us. We were invincible. That's what we told ourselves anyway, but that was before we came to this quiet, unassuming blue-green world. Before we met them. It started as whispers in the mess hall, quiet murmurs after a patrol returned with fewer members than it left with. Not from glorious combat, but from nothing. One moment a soldier was there, the next a bloodstain on the moss and a faint echo on the comms. Gorvok, a veteran of the Siege of Cygnus, threw his nutrient paste against the wall. "It's not natural," he roared, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "No tracks, no energy signatures. They're like ghosts. How does a species with such primitive tech survive in this death trap of a planet, let alone fight us?" His fear was a virus, and it spread quickly. We began to look at the dense, dripping jungles not as territory to be conquered, but as a living entity that was hunting us. The constant humidity, the strange calls of native fauna, the way shadows seemed to move on their own. It all began to gnaw at our discipline. Our bravado was a thin shell, and it was cracking. Some of the younger recruits started hoarding rations, convinced we wouldn't be resupplied. Whispers of a strategic retreat, cowardice, we would have called it a month ago, became hopeful prayers. They called the inhabitants Deathworlders, a name spoken with a mix of revulsion and awe. Then came the night of the twin moons. Command had ordered a full perimeter sweep of the forward operating base, a show of force to boost morale. We stood in our gleaming battle armor, plasma rifles humming, feeling a flicker of our old arrogance. That's when it happened. The perimeter lights didn't just go out, they exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging us into absolute darkness. Our advanced night vision flickered, displaying only static. Panic flared. We started firing blindly into the jungle, our disciplined ranks breaking as troopers collided in the dark. And through the chaos, we saw them, not as soldiers, but as fleeting silhouettes moving with a silent, terrifying grace between the trees. They were smaller than us, clad in dark gear that drank the moonlight. They weren't invisible, but they might as well have been. One moment a Cathar warrior would raise his rifle, and the next he'd just fold. A soft thud, and nothing more. No screams, just silence. It was a coordinated strike, a surgical dismantling of our formation. We were a legion, and we were being taken apart by a handful of shadows. The chaos turned inward. I saw two of my own squad mates get into a firefight with each other, each convinced the other was an infiltrator. The fear was a poison in our veins, making us clumsy, making us stupid. Our commander, Warlord Zorgan, a towering figure who had personally shattered the gates of a fortress with his power fist, was screaming orders into his comm, but his voice was tight with a terror I'd never heard before. We were the predators, yet we were the ones being herded like prey. Days later, we were licking our wounds in the supposed safety of our fortified command center. Zorgan was planning a counter-assault, trying to salvage our pride. That's when the second strike came. It wasn't a frontal assault. An explosion ripped through the generator bay, deep within the fortress. Red emergency lights bathed everything in a bloody glow. Then the walls themselves seemed to tear open. The humans came through the vents, through the floors, appearing from nowhere. They moved with an economy of motion that was horrifying to watch. Every shot, every movement had a purpose. They weren't just fighting, they were executing a plan with chilling precision. Zorgan, in his full ceremonial armor, found himself face to face with one of them. The human was half his size but moved like a viper. It dodged Zorgan's furious plasma blast, and in the next instant a blade flashed. Zorgan screamed, clutching a smoking wound in his side as his guards dragged him toward an escape shuttle. He barely made it out alive. As the shuttle doors closed, I saw him staring back at the chaos we were leaving behind. The invincible warlord of the Cathar Legion, defeated and retreating. In his eyes I saw the same fear that was in all of us. It was the dawning, terrifying realization that we had not come to a world of primitives. We had stumbled into the den of apex predators. We had invaded the home of the Deathworlders, and they were just getting started. For weeks we were the hunted. For weeks we hid in the shadows, watching them parade through our ruined cities with their advanced weaponry, believing they had already won. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated our will to survive. They forgot that this is our planet. And now the hunt has reversed. We started in the deserts. They marched in perfect formations, their gleaming armor impervious to our conventional weapons. But it wasn't their armor we were aiming for. They saw the sand as just ground to cover, but we saw it as a weapon. A coordinated series of seismic charges, and suddenly, their perfect formation was sinking into a massive churning pit of quicksand. Their technology couldn't save them from the very earth they sought to conquer. Panic erupted in their comms, a sound we were starting to enjoy. Next, we lured them into the canyons. They came with aerial superiority, their sleek fighters strafing the ravines, confident they had us pinned down. But we weren't in the ravines. We were above them, lining the cliff edges. As they passed through the narrowest point, a rain of steel and rock, guided by simple physics, tore their advanced craft from the sky. They crashed and burned, their pilots bewildered. How could primitive tactics defeat their sophisticated systems? They didn't understand. We weren't just fighting. We were using our home as an extension of our bodies. Their morale began to crack. They saw us as ghosts striking from nowhere and vanishing. That's when they sent in their elite mercenary, a warrior famed across a dozen systems for its brutality and skill. It stalked one of our outposts, cloaked and armed to the teeth, expecting to find terrified soldiers. It found a trap. A simple pressure plate, a net, and a waiting squad. The legendary hunter was neutralized in less than 10 seconds, disarmed and captured before it could even process what happened. The message was clear. Your best isn't good enough. The fear truly set in when we took the fight to the night. Their advanced optics should have given them the edge, but we knew the darkness better. We moved through it like specters, using silenced weapons and hand-to-hand combat. They'd see a sentry disappear one moment, and then another the next. No alarms, no firefights, just gone. Whispers started spreading through their ranks. They weren't fighting soldiers anymore, they were fighting demons. They started seeing us as something supernatural, a force of nature they couldn't possibly comprehend. They were right about one thing. We are a force of nature. We are humanity. We were pushed to the brink, and now we are pushing back. They thought they were claiming a planet, but all they did was awaken a sleeping giant. This isn't a war for survival anymore. This is a lesson in what happens when you try to take our home. They may have started this war, but we will be the ones to finish it. The broadcast crackled, a voice laced with a strange mix of reverence and terror echoing across the mercenary channel. They're not just soldiers, the Cathar warlord hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. The intel was wrong. All of it. These are Deathworlders. On the holographic map, red icons representing his units were blinking out one by one. The humans, once considered a primitive race ripe for conquest, had turned the tables. They were no longer defending, they were hunting. This was supposed to be the final push, the glorious conclusion to a swift and profitable campaign. Instead, it had become a slaughter. The human counter-assault wasn't a desperate, chaotic charge. It was a symphony of destruction, precise and terrifyingly efficient. "Sector Gamma, report," the warlord roared. Static was his only reply. Sector Gamma was gone. The humans had used the canyon's natural echo to mask their approach, setting up a kill box that the Cathar vanguard had marched right into. It wasn't brute force, it was predation. Panic, a sentiment alien to the battle-hardened Cathar, began to fester. One unit, fleeing into what they thought was a dense, safe jungle, found themselves ensnared, not in energy nets or plasma fields, but in crude, effective pits lined with sharpened stakes. Another group, seeking higher ground, triggered a controlled rock slide, buried under tons of granite. The humans were using the planet itself as a weapon. They didn't just fight on the world, they fought with it. It was their ally, an extension of their will. A small squad of Cathar scouts, considered the best trackers in the mercenary guild, was cornered and captured. Not killed, but disarmed with brutal, non-lethal efficiency. The human commander, a woman with eyes as cold and gray as a winter storm, approached the lead scout. She didn't shout or threaten. She knelt, held up a Cathar datapad, and began cycling through their tactical deployments, pointing out every flaw, every weakness they had just exploited. She spoke their language haltingly, translated by her own device. "You value strength," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "But you mistake noise for power. Your attack patterns were loud. Ours were quiet. You came to conquer a world. You only found its apex predators." The interrogation wasn't about gathering information. It was a psychological lesson, a demonstration that human intellect was as deadly as their rifles. As the captured aliens were led away, a new sound began to permeate the jungle. It wasn't gunfire or explosions. It was a low, rhythmic thrumming, almost subliminal. It vibrated through the soil, up the Cathar's legs, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then came the calls, a series of clicks and whistles echoing through the canopy, answered by others in the distance. The warlord stared at his tactical display. No human signatures were generating the sound. It wasn't technology. It was something else. Was this another trap? Were they communicating with the planet's fauna? The chilling realization dawned. The humans hadn't just mastered their world's dangers. They had tamed them. The jungle, their enemy, was now the humans' orchestra, and its symphony was a death knell. The hunt had only just begun. They thought us weak, scattered, a fledgling species barely clinging to a single blue rock. They were wrong. The Great Armada, a fleet that had conquered 1,000 suns, shattered against our shores. Now, only a handful of their ships limp back through the void, their crews whispering tales of the demons from Terra. They speak of soldiers who refused to die, of tactics so unpredictable they bordered on madness, of a fury that burned brighter than a dying star. They thought they were bringing war. We showed them what war truly is. In the smoldering ruins of their conquered worlds, a different story unfolds. On Xylos, a human engineering corps unarmed and working under the harsh glare of a binary sun, raises cities from ash. They share their technology, their food, their labor, asking for nothing in return. The Xylans, who had been enslaved for generations, watch in stunned silence. Who are these beings who can wage total war with one hand and offer boundless compassion with the other? They rebuild, they heal, and then, as quickly as they appeared, they are gone, leaving behind functioning power grids, purified water, and an enigma that will puzzle Xylon philosophers for centuries. These conflicting tales spread like wildfire across the galactic networks. To the remnants of the Armada, we are monsters, unstoppable forces of nature. To the liberated races like the Xylons, we are saviors, almost gods. The name human is spoken in hushed tones in the darkest corners of the galaxy and shouted with hope in the brightest. We've become a legend, a myth, a force you don't provoke, a force you pray you never have to understand. The galaxy learned a lesson written in fire and steel. Do not poke the sleeping giant on the blue marble, but the legend is far from complete. While the galaxy trembles and wonders on a desolate moon overlooking a newly established galactic trade route, a lone figure stands in the shadows. Their face is obscured by a helmet, but the simple, unadorned armor is unmistakably human-made. They watch the ships come and go, a data pad in their gloved hand displaying cryptic energy signatures, signatures that don't match any known technology, human or alien. What are they watching for? What deeper game is being played? The Armada was just the beginning. The real story of humanity's journey into the cosmos is only just starting, and the universe is not ready for what comes next. Thank you for watching this chapter of our story unfold. If you enjoyed this journey into the stars, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the galaxy. What do you think that lone human is looking for? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.